Hey there YouTube, the user IzukiGuroto J recently posted a video in which he asked 11 questions for computer gamers, and this has worked out quite nicely because these will serve as a nice basis for my videos in response to Toya which are coming up regarding philosophy, morality and narrative in computer games. So, onto the questions. Number 1. How long have you been a gamer? Practically for as long as I can remember, actually. There has always been a computer system with video games of some sort in my house that I've had access to. My first system was a Commodore Amiga back when I was 5. The Commodore Amiga was an odd little thing. It was sort of along with the Amstrad, it was the first multimedia PC for homes, if you like. It ran on floppy disks, had a huge external power system, and is remembered quite fondly by many people from the period because it's one of the more powerful computers from the time. And also you could use it for various multimedia tasks. It had a very basic Windows-like system called Workbench, and you could use it for word processing and that sort of thing. But that's my earliest memory, and I have incredibly fond memories of it too. Some of the computer games for the Commodore Amiga were so forward-thinking and so progressive. They actually established a lot of elements that would become traditional in computer games later on, although they're not always accredited with it, which is a great shame. Number 2. What is your earliest memory of video games and how did it impact you? My earliest memory of video games is probably playing computer games such as Wolfchild and Another World and Turrican 2 and Shadow of the Beast on my Commodore Amiga. And how did it impact me? That's a really good question, actually, because these games, they didn't have very coherent narratives. This was sort of before the time when games had coherent narratives. They were sort of either tacked on in the instruction manual and didn't really have that much impact on the game, or they were implied within the game itself. So what I found was that I would construct narratives in my head as the game was going, and this has helped, along with exposure to other narrative materials such as books and movies and whatnot, helped to shape my general perception of narrative and my love of narrative as well, and also my love of particular types of imagery as well. And if you think about the games by Psygnosis, such as Shadow of the Beast, Orc, Agony, etc., etc., a lot of them have this very strange, surreal imagery in them. It's very dark as well. And yes, I think that impacted greatly upon those images which I have a particular association with in my mind now. Number 3. What is your current gaming platform of choice and why? I play lots of different gaming platforms, actually. I don't really have that much time for computer games anymore, certainly not as much as I used to. It has to be a very special computer game these days to actually make me sit down and play it all the way through. But my platforms of choice, the ones I go back to most of all, are the PC. I think PC games are generally of an incredible quality. Obviously there's lots of stinkers, as there are on any systems, but I find that a lot of the innovations that later filter down into the general console market happen at least decades earlier on the PC than they do on the actual, before the console markets pick them up. And there are some real gems, especially the more obscure games, the games that aren't marketed very well. There are some absolute gems on the PC. Things like System Shock 2. System Shock 2 is the predecessor and indeed the parent of more high-profile games such as BioShock. If you play System Shock 2 and BioShock, you will find that a lot of the elements that are essential to BioShock, things such as hacking and the general pervasive atmosphere, the interface, etc., etc., are actually coined in System Shock first. And although it's obviously graphically inferior, I think on the whole I prefer System Shock to BioShock, fantastic as BioShock is. I also like the Xbox. I think the Xbox is a wonderful platform that sort of bridges the gap between the PC and the console market. It's like it's a missing link, if you like, and I think that evolution will continue from the Xbox on. I also like the range of games that you get on the Xbox. There's a huge variety of games on the Xbox, and I like the controller as well. I love the GameCube. I like the GameCube for specific game series. I mean, I'm a bit of a fan of some of the established Nintendo franchises, things like Zelda, and the Mario games are also vastly superb. They're great platform games, and most of all Metroid. I think the Metroid games, the Metroid Prime games for the GameCube, are examples of video game art. Just aesthetically, they're so beautiful, and the worlds they create are so dense and richly textured. They are well worth playing. I'd advise, GameCubes are so cheap now, I'd advise anyone who has a passion for computer games to pick up a GameCube and get the Metroid Prime games. They are beautiful. Number 4. Is there any specific genre of game that you enjoy most? Likewise, is there any genre you utterly despise, refuse to play? I like any game that has a narrative, or a good narrative and good characters. Anything like that will usually attract me and drag me in, even if the actual mechanics of the game are a bit shit. There are several games I can think of where the mechanics are crap. Absolute crap, but I've continued playing through because the narratives are so good. You mentioned the Soul Reaver series in your own answers, and yeah, I agree completely. The Legacy of Kain games are fantastic. The games themselves, the mechanics vary in quality. In fact, the more recent games like Defiance, oh shit. The camera angles are crap, the combat system is very basic and annoying, but the characters are so well drawn, the back mythology is so rich and brilliantly conceived, and the actual story itself so well composed that it doesn't matter. I was drawn in by the narrative and I wanted to know what was going to happen. I cared about the characters, and I think that it's a prime example. The Soul Reaver, the Legacy of Kain series, if you like, as a whole, is a prime example of how computer games are a perfectly legitimate medium of narrative and can in fact be much more successful than movies or books. So, and role-playing games as well. I do like role-playing games in general. I like the Final Fantasy series. I'm not a hard and fast Final Fantasy fanboy. There are certain ones I like and certain ones I don't. I loved Final Fantasy 7 and Final Fantasy 8. I didn't like Final Fantasy 9. 10 was superb, and 12 was a great game, and I want to emphasise that word game. The thing with the Final Fantasy games is they're more than computer games. They are examples of computer game art. They are aesthetically beautiful, the music is stunning, and the narratives are generally awesome. The narratives are so immersive and engaging. Final Fantasy XII was different. It refined some of the elements of the gameplay, and that was fine. I think the way they refined the technical aspect was brilliant, but the story was crap. Utter crap. I couldn't be bothered to complete it, to be honest, because I just wasn't drawn in. I didn't care. I didn't care about the characters. I didn't care about Vaan or Balthier or any of the others, because they had no development whatsoever. It just left me feeling very cold. So I didn't complete it, despite its technical qualities. I couldn't be bothered with it. Other games that I like because of their narrative, Resident Evil, the Resident Evil games. Again, that's another series that sort of lost its way. I think I liked Resident Evil 1 and 2. Couldn't be that bothered with 3, and 4 was good. I liked 4. I liked the way they changed the dynamics slightly, but 5 misses the point profoundly. I think it's an action game. It's not a horror game. The thing that defines the Resident Evil series is it's the atmosphere of dread it creates. This notion of overwhelming threat. And Resident Evil 5 just doesn't have it. It's not a horror game by any stretch of the imagination. It's just not frightening at all. But even so, generally speaking, I do like the Resident Evil games, principally because of the way they're all homages to horror movie conventions, particularly B-movies. I particularly enjoyed the first Resident Evil because I like the claustrophobia of it. That's my kind of horror, where everything is very fraught and there's that creeping sense that things are going to escalate and go very, very wrong very, very quickly, as opposed to the action horror stylings of the sequels.